latest reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. A passenger plane carrying nearly 50 people crashes in a remote area of Russia's far eastern Amur region, with rescuers finding no survivors. Cambodia calls for an urgent UNSC session as the country trades cross-border fire with Thailand in a fresh round of clashes, amid weeks of escalating tensions over a border dispute. Israel reviews a revised response from Hamas to a proposed ceasefire and hostage release deal, with an Israeli official describing it as workable, though the details of the agreement have not been disclosed. Rwandan President Paul Kagame replaces the country's prime minister, naming the deputy governor of the central bank to the role without explaining the decision. And the Philippines shuts down schools and cancels flights as torrential rains driven by a typhoon and a separate tropical storm pound the country's northern island of Luzon. Hello and welcome. We begin with escalating tensions between South Africa and the United States. Amid rapidly deteriorating ties, Washington is now reviewing its diplomatic relations with Pretoria and possible sanctions on its officials. U.S. lawmakers have advanced a bill that seeks to reassess the bilateral relationship and impose sanctions on certain South African government officials. The bill is called the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act. It accuses South Africa of undermining U.S. interests by maintaining close relationships with Russia and China. It also accuses South Africa of backing Hamas, which is at war in Gaza with Israel. It further says that sanctions will target officials linked to corruption or human rights abuses. No individuals have been named. The bill was passed by the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee and will now move to the House of Representatives. It would need to pass both the House and the Senate before it could be signed into law. The bill was introduced in April by Republican Congressman Ronnie Jackson. After the committee approval, he celebrated on social media, saying South Africa made its choice when it abandoned America to side with communists and terrorists. Palestinian cause. In 2023, it filed a case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, accusing it of genocide, a move also highlighted in the bill. The latest developments come days after a shock report by a prominent South African journalist in Times of Israel. As per the report, a $400 million lawsuit is being prepared in the U.S. against President Cyril Ramaphosa and other officials. Why? It's over allegations that South Africa allegedly collaborated with Hamas before the October 7 attacks. The report contains supposed evidence of coordination between South African officials, Hamas and Iran, even pointing to the direct involvement of President Ramaphosa. It warns that sanctions on South African government debt could trigger interest rate hikes, costing taxpayers an estimated $55 million per day. Pretoria has not yet responded to the report. It has previously denied any links to Hamas, insisting its support is for the rights of the Palestinian people. The committee's approval underscores the sharp decline in US-South Africa relations, which have worsened since President Trump's return to power. He has accused the South African government of anti-white racism and a so-called white genocide. He has also introduced a refugee program for white South Africans. Trade relations are also under strain. South Africa faces a looming 30% US tariff. It also risks losing benefits under AGOA, which allows duty-free exports to the United States. The program is set to expire in September, with no assurances of renewal from Trump. The US has already expelled the South African ambassador, and with the Relations Review Bill, there are no signs of this partnership repairing anytime soon. As Washington turns up the heat on Pretoria, all eyes are now on how South Africa will respond to these growing allegations and diplomatic pressure. Now, for more on this, we have with us Ayanda, a political commentator and journalist, joining us live from Johannesburg. Hello to you, Ayanda.
Hello, Alyson, and good afternoon to all Firstpost listeners.
Now, what specific aspects of South Africa's foreign policy have triggered this US congressional response, and how do these align or conflict with Washington's strategic interests globally?
Well, foreign policy, first and foremost, is always based on human rights. And our chapter 2 of our constitution is the Bill of Human Rights that we follow. So that is the underpinning of all of the foreign policy, and especially with our diplomatic ties, it's all based on human rights. With that being said, South Africa can't dictate to other countries how it is that they are made to run their governments. And so the relationships that we have with other nations may not mirror the human rights policies that we follow as a country. Understanding that the United States also has their own sovereign plans, and also their own foreign ideologies and their foreign policies. They also too have allies with different nations. I think the conflict here lies in the fact that we, as South Africa, as a sovereign state that we are, have made the choice to have relationships with countries such as Iran, countries such as China, and countries such as Russia, which then makes us a perceived threat because we have allied with these nations. Yet the United States has made a choice to not ally with some of these nations, such as China, such as Iran. And we know that Iran is going to be coming in and joining the BRICS bloc. And China, of course, is part of BRICS as well. What also seems to be adding to this relationship is the fact that we have taken Israel to court in the ICJ. And Israel is a strong ally of the United States. And thus we're hearing the misinformation and disinformation train, such as the fact that they assume that the ANC in South Africa had any kind of involvement in what happened on October 7th, which is absolutely not true. And so couple that with the misinformation and disinformation, including the fact that they assume that South Africa and Russia have had, have had military exchanges and displays, which have all, of course, been proven to be misinformation and disinformation by our presidents and by our minister in Durko, previously being Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. This misinformation and disinformation has now led to the US and South Africa bilateral relations looking the way that they do now, especially with the expulsion of our ambassador.
Right. And Ayanda, if sanctions on South African officials are implemented, what might be the political and the economic consequences for South Africa, particularly in terms of trade, investment, and diplomatic standing?
So economically speaking, what's going to happen is that there are now going to be tariffs that will be implemented on whatever trade relations that we have with the United States, which will make our economy a little bit more difficult. we obviously have trade relations with BRICS, but we also have trade relations with the United States of America, and our farmers are going to be the biggest impacted by these relations taking place. Diplomatically speaking, it means that if our leaders, especially those who are in government, receive this démarche from the United States, this means that they will not be able to travel for trade relations, for any other political issues that they might want to ventilate outside of going, obviously, to the United Nations. So they can only stay within the boundaries of where the United Nations is, which is currently in New York right now. So that would mean that diplomatically, they can no longer have relations with us anymore, because now there are leaders within our country who have now officially been sanctioned, which then might lead to diplomatic ties being cut with South Africa in general. Of course, we do not wish for that to take place, because then that would mean that trade relations with the rest of the continent will also be able to might actually follow suit. But we're seeing the 30% tariff increases that are going to be introduced to our goods happening very soon. Lesotho is also going through something similar, and as well as Nigeria. So there are different economies that are currently being attacked right now by the economic protectionist policies that the United States is currently taking right now. But politically and diplomatically, I think that South Africa really should have been able to foresee that this is going to take place, knowing the erratic policies that took place in 2016 with the Trump administration right up until 2020, and then again right now. I think we should have been better prepared for what it is that we would be facing, especially because we are taking one of the biggest USA allies, Israel, to the ICJ courts, and thus we are seeing the misinformation and disinformation trail and cycle start to impact not only our economy, but our diplomatic and social relations with other nations as well.
Yeah. Ayanda, always great having you on the show. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Moving on to some news from the Southeast African nation of Mozambique. The country's main opposition leader, Venancio Mondlane, is in a legal mess for leading massive protests against the disputed October 2024 elections. He has been charged with grave offences like inciting and instigating terrorism, among others. Mozambique's Attorney General's office formally charged him on Tuesday. Denying the charges, Mondlane said that he is being persecuted despite an agreement with President Daniel Chapo to end violence from all sides. Calling the Chapo government a dictatorial regime, Mondlane said that the public prosecutor's office was being used as an instrument to target him. He added that he was interrogated in March for 10 hours by prosecutors without being given any reason. The 51-year-old leader said he was being targeted for challenging unequivocal electoral fraud. Mondlane has positioned himself as a stern voice against Frelimo government. He added that those who want to fight this crime are attacked, persecuted, imprisoned, killed, and wounded. The charges followed months of violent protests in Mozambique. The stir was against a disputed general election in October of last year. It was led by Mondlane, who alleged vote rigging. Mondlane claimed victory in the election. However, the official results placed him second. Daniel Chapo of the ruling Frelimo party won the polls. The party has governed Mozambique since independence from Portugal in 1975. It is not just the domestic politicians who cited irregularities. Even Western observers maintain that the vote was not free and fair. However, Frelimo denied allegations of electoral fraud. Despite the claims, Mozambique's electoral authority refused to order a recount. Many allege that this contributed to the violence. The protests were reportedly the largest the Frelimo party faced since independence. Two local civil society groups say that nearly 400 people have died in violent demonstrations, while over 600 were injured. Mondlane and Chapo then met in March, and they agreed to a peace deal. Their meeting raised hopes for calm and stability, but the opposition leader said that he and his allies continued to face persecution. Mozambique saw months of political instability and violence, and now with charges framed against Mondlane, tensions are again running high, leaving Mozambique's fragile democracy hanging in the balance. And our next story today is from the West African nation of Gambia. Thousands hit the streets in the capital of Banjul to protest against President Adama Barrow's government. Now, the protesters marched through the city chanting "Power and People," carrying handwritten placards which read, "Gambians are not slaves to corruption." The demonstrations were against alleged government corruption. Gambians sought justice over a series of recent scandals that have rocked the country.
Need for such a protest because of, in Gambia, corruption and poverty. Everyone believes that it is not innate but adaptive in this country. Because of we have been living under pillage and plunder for so long, and corruption is endemic in this country. Like it is a norm, normalized here as at now, and corruption is being seen as many as a religion in this country. People do a whole lot of things and go scot-free. That's why we have 1,000,002 things to protest about in this country, but we chose only 5 for a start to do it.
The protests were led by Westfield Monument, a popular organization for demonstrations. The organizers said that they were demanding accountability. They called on President Barrow to tackle corruption.
Environmental corruption across the coastline. They are mining the last sand dunes in some of these communities. So what are people going to do? We sit and give a blind eye to it. The Gambia Environmental Alliance have given warnings and even action points for the government to take action, but they refuse to take action. It's like corruption has been condoned in this country here.
The demonstrators carried petition letters to several government ministries, including the President's Office and the National Assembly. These petitions listed the corruption scandals linked to the ministries. The Health Ministry was linked to the 2022 cough syrup scam, in which around 70 children aged 5 and under died after consuming an over-the-counter medicine. Another petition to the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy pertained to a Russian oil deal, under which petroleum valued at over $30 million entered the country under suspicious circumstances in 2023. According to reports, the government officials allegedly received kickbacks in the deal. Protesters also raised concerns over the misappropriation of funds during the COVID-19 pandemic.
COVID-19 report from the National Assembly, there are millions of dollars that were pumped to the health sector to upgrade our health system. But unfortunately, after the COVID-19, National Assembly make an inquiry about the whole project, the whole funds that were that came into this country. But they found out that there were thousands of dollars that went to individual pocket rather than to the state coffers in terms of developing our health sector.
Gambia is facing multiple overlapping corruption crises, from port management controversies to the misuse of public funds and questionable asset sales. Gambia, a low-income nation, continues to struggle with widespread poverty and food insecurity. The economy relies heavily on agriculture, but suffers from weak planning and poor government oversight. In such fragile conditions, corruption scandals only deepen public hardship, as limited national resources are siphoned off by those in power. And for our last story, we focus on the long-running dispute over the Western Sahara. Portugal has now become the latest country to back Morocco's claim to the region. Portugal has joined the growing list of nations supporting Morocco's autonomy plan, which seeks to give limited self-rule to Western Sahara under Moroccan sovereignty. Lisbon has described the plan as serious, credible and constructive for the resource-rich North African territory, where the Algerian-backed Polisario Front has long campaigned for independence. Now, the remarks came after a meeting in Lisbon between the Moroccan foreign minister and his Portuguese counterpart. The Portuguese minister, however, said that any solution must be led by the United Nations. Morocco, for its part, highlighted the move as a sign of strengthening bilateral ties with Portugal. Western Sahara is a resource-rich region in northwest Africa, known for its phosphate reserves and fisheries. However, it is also the center of Africa's longest-running territorial dispute. Morocco currently controls around 80% of the territory, while the Polisario Front, a pro-independence group, demands full statehood. The separatist movement is armed and financially supported by Algeria. Now, the dispute dates back to 1975, when Spain withdrew as a colonial power. Morocco and Mauritania then moved in to claim the land. The Algeria-backed Polisario Front fought both states. Mauritania eventually withdrew, leaving Morocco to consolidate control over most of the region. Algeria has since provided military and financial aid to the Polisario Front. In earlier decades, many countries openly supported the Polisario Front, and Morocco had far less international backing. But over the years, this stance has shifted, with major global powers now supporting Morocco's autonomy plan. This includes 3 permanent UNSC members: the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. It also includes Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, as well as African nations like Kenya and Ghana. Now, this signals a global shift in approach toward resolving this long-standing issue. This also marks a major diplomatic win for Rabat. Morocco has been able to gain such widespread backing through a mix of strategic, economic, and geopolitical initiatives. For example, the United States recognized Moroccan sovereignty in 2020 after Rabat signed the Abraham Accords and normalized ties with Israel. Morocco has also developed billions of dollars worth of infrastructure in Western Sahara, including ports, roads, and phosphate mining, winning support from the nations interested in trade and energy. On the other hand, Algeria has found itself increasingly isolated diplomatically. The Western Sahara issue has also sparked a diplomatic row with former colonizer France. This after Paris took a sharp U-turn last year to openly back Rabat's autonomy plan. Now, this has damaged Algeria-France relations, affected trade ties, and triggered a migration row, as France seeks to deport illegal Algerian migrants. To add to the tensions, a prominent French-Algerian writer was recently handed a 5-year prison sentence in Algeria for anti-national comments, further straining ties between the two countries. As Algeria faces diplomatic isolation, more countries rally behind Rabat's autonomy plan, with Morocco's momentum on Western Sahara stronger than ever. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.